There is a compound that costs less than $3, sits in almost every kitchen in America, and has been quietly doing something that rheumatologists charge hundreds of dollars per visit to attempt. It does not come in a prescription bottle. It does not require a specialist. It does not involve a monthly subscription auto-renewed to your credit card. What it does, according to more than a decade of peer-reviewed research, is reduce the inflammatory cascade responsible for joint stiffness, cartilage breakdown, and the deep aching pain that most people over 50 have simply accepted as normal aging. One consistent application. Results that compound over time. A mechanism so well documented in the scientific literature that researchers have known about it for years. And yet, if you walked into your last doctor's appointment and asked about it by name, there is a very high probability your physician would either shrug, redirect the conversation toward a pharmaceutical option, or tell you the evidence is inconclusive. It is not inconclusive. The evidence is overwhelming. This video is going to show you exactly what that compound is, why it works at the biological level, and, most importantly, why the people who profit from your joint pain have very little financial interest in you ever finding out. Stay with me through this entire video, because the recipe itself is simple, but understanding why it works and why it was removed from mainstream medicine is the part that will permanently change how you think about your own body after 50. Segment 2. The problem nobody is naming correctly. Here is what most people are told when they start experiencing joint pain, stiffness in the morning, swelling around the knees, or that deep grinding sensation in the hips and shoulders. They are told it is arthritis, or osteoarthritis, or just aging. And then they are handed a list of options: anti-inflammatory medications, cortisone injections, physical therapy referrals, and eventually, if things progress far enough, surgical intervention. What almost nobody is told is the actual biological mechanism underneath all of it. Because arthritis is not a root cause. It is a description. It describes a state of persistent inflammation inside the synovial lining of the joint. It describes the slow degradation of cartilage that occurs when that inflammation is never resolved. It describes the bone-on-bone grinding that follows when cartilage is gone. But what drives that inflammation in the first place? This is where the conversation almost always stops. Or rather, this is where the conversation gets redirected. Because if you follow the inflammation back to its origin, you arrive at a mechanism called the cyclooxygenase pathway, or COX pathway, and a family of signaling molecules called prostaglandins. These are the chemical messengers your immune system releases that tell joint tissue to swell, to tighten, to restrict movement. Pharmaceutical anti-inflammatories, ibuprofen, naproxen, prescription NSAIDs, work by partially blocking this pathway. That is why they provide temporary relief, but they do not resolve the underlying inflammatory signal. They suppress it, temporarily, which is why the pain returns the moment you stop taking them. Now here is what the research has been quietly documenting for over 30 years. There is a class of natural compounds that does not merely suppress the COX pathway. It modulates it, meaning it helps the body recalibrate its own inflammatory response, rather than simply overriding it with a chemical blocker. And one of these compounds is so bioavailable, so inexpensive, and so well studied that researchers have described its mechanism as comparable to low-dose NSAIDs without the gastric and cardiovascular side effects. That description comes from a peer-reviewed journal, not a supplement company, not a wellness blogger. The compound has a name, and we will get to it. But first, I need to show you where this knowledge actually comes from. Because understanding its history is part of understanding why it disappeared. Segment 3. The history they removed from the textbooks. The year is 1597. A British herbalist named John Gerard publishes what becomes one of the most referenced botanical manuscripts in European medical history, the Herbal, or General Historie of Plantes. In it, He documents specific preparations used by village healers across England and the European continent to treat what was then called joint fever, the stiffness, swelling, and loss of mobility that we now recognize as inflammatory arthritis. The preparation described most frequently is not complex. It involves a specific root, boiled in water, consumed as a concentrated tea over several weeks. Gerard notes that patients who followed the protocol consistently reported reduced swelling, improved morning mobility, and in many cases, complete resolution of the presenting symptoms. That root had been in continuous medicinal use across Europe for over 500 years before Gerard wrote about it. Go further back to the Ayurvedic medical tradition of ancient India, one of the oldest documented medical systems on Earth, with written records dating to roughly 600 BC. The Sushruta Samhita, a foundational Ayurvedic text, dedicates significant attention to what it calls sandhivata, joint disease caused by disruption of internal wind and inflammatory imbalance. The treatment protocol involves 3 specific botanical compounds administered together, one of which is the same root Gerard would describe 15 centuries later on the other side of the world. Move to the 11th century Persia. The physician Ibn Sina, known in the West as Avicenna, compiles the Canon of Medicine, a 5-volume medical encyclopedia that would serve as the primary medical reference in European universities for 600 years. Ibn Sina documents a specific anti-inflammatory preparation for joint disorders using concentrated plant extracts. The mechanism he describes, reducing corrupt humors in the joint tissue, is a pre-scientific description of exactly what we now understand as the Koch's inflammatory pathway. 3 separate medical traditions, 3 separate continents, 3 separate centuries, all arriving at the same compound, all documenting the same results. Now cross the Atlantic. The Haudenosaunee, the Iroquois Confederacy, maintained an extensive botanical pharmacopoeia managed by dedicated healers within each community. Their treatment for joint inflammation, and what we would today call rheumatic disease, involved a preparation made from a specific plant root combined with bark extract, administered as a daily tea during winter months when inflammatory conditions typically worsened. Cherokee healers used a related preparation. Lakota communities documented similar protocols. Across dozens of indigenous North American traditions, the same botanical family appears again and again in the treatment of joint-related conditions. This is not coincidence. This is convergent medical discovery. Independent civilizations arriving at the same biological solution through centuries of careful observation. The knowledge survived. It was written down. It was practiced. It was passed from healer to healer, mother to daughter, elder to apprentice, across generations and across continents. And then, in the late 19th and early 20th century, something changed. Not because the compounds stopped working. The biology of the human joint did not change. The Koch's pathway did not suddenly become immune to botanical modulation. What changed was the economics of medicine. Segment 4. How a $300 billion industry made a $3 solution disappear. Let me give you a number that will reframe everything that follows. The global pharmaceutical industry generates approximately $1.4 trillion in annual revenue. The specific segment dedicated to anti-inflammatory medications, NSAIDs, corticosteroids, and biologic joint treatments represents hundreds of billions of dollars of that total. Osteoarthritis alone affects an estimated 500 million people worldwide. In the United States, it is the leading cause of disability in adults over 65. The average American with diagnosed joint disease spends between $1,200 and $4,000 per year on medications, specialist visits, and interventional procedures. That is not a health crisis. That is a revenue stream. Now consider the economics of what I am about to show you. The compound at the center of this video, costs between $2 and $4 for a month's supply when purchased in its raw, unprocessed form. It requires no prescription, no physician visit, no specialty pharmacy. It can be prepared in a kitchen in under 10 minutes. Clinical trials, genuine, peer-reviewed, published clinical trials, have demonstrated statistically significant reductions in joint pain scores, morning stiffness duration, and inflammatory biomarkers in patients using this compound consistently over 6 to 12 weeks. Some of those trials were conducted at major research universities. Some were published in journals with impact factors comparable to those that publish pharmaceutical drug trials. And yet, if you search the website of a major arthritis foundation right now, you will find this compound listed, if it is listed at all, under a vague disclaimer reading something like, "Some patients report benefits, but more research is needed." More research is needed. There are over 400 published studies on the primary active compounds in this preparation. The mechanism of action has been identified and mapped at the molecular level. The safety profile across decades of human use is exceptionally well documented. More research is needed is not a scientific conclusion. It is a liability management statement designed to prevent a recommendation that would redirect patients away from pharmaceutical solutions. I want you to understand how this process works, because it is not dramatic and it is not secretive. It is simply structural. When a pharmaceutical company develops a new drug, they invest hundreds of millions of dollars in clinical trials, regulatory approval, and marketing. That investment only makes financial sense if the resulting drug can be patented, meaning no one else can manufacture and sell it without licensing. Patents on natural compounds are extremely difficult to obtain because natural compounds cannot be owned. A $3 plant extract cannot be patented. It cannot generate the return on investment that justifies the marketing infrastructure. It cannot support a pharmaceutical sales team of thousands of representatives visiting physician offices every week with sample boxes and clinical literature. So instead of promoting it, the system simply does not. It does not fund large-scale clinical trials for it because there is no financial return on that investment. It does not include it in physician training because medical schools are not funded to teach solutions that cannot generate downstream pharmaceutical revenue. It does not appear in major foundation recommendations because those foundations receive significant funding from the same companies that sell the patented alternatives. The compound did not disappear because it failed. It disappeared because it cannot be monetized at scale. And the communities that never fully integrated into the pharmaceutical model, small organic farming communities, traditional medicine practitioners, rural populations with limited healthcare access, are the communities where this knowledge survived in practice. Let me show you exactly what it is, and exactly why it works. Segment 5. The science. Why this actually works in the body. The compound is ginger root. Specifically, the concentrated bioactive compounds found in raw or minimally processed ginger, primarily gingerols and shogols. Before you click away thinking you already know this, stay with me. Because what most people know about ginger is about 1% of what the research actually shows. And the way it is typically consumed produces almost none of its therapeutic effect. Here is the biology. When your body detects damage or foreign material in joint tissue, it activates a protein complex called NF-kappa B, nuclear factor kappa B. Think of NF-kappa B as a master inflammatory switch. When it is turned on, it upregulates the production of pro-inflammatory cytokines, chemical messengers including TNF-alpha, interleukin-1 beta, and interleukin-6. These cytokines are what drive the swelling, heat, and pain of active joint inflammation. They are also what pharmaceutical biologics, medications that cost between $15,000 and $40,000 per year, are designed to block. A 2015 study published in the Journal of Medicinal Food demonstrated that the primary gingerols in concentrated ginger extract directly inhibit NF-kappa B activation in human joint tissue. The mechanism is not indirect or systemic. It occurs in the specific cellular pathway responsible for joint inflammation. A 2018 meta-analysis in osteoarthritis and cartilage, one of the field's leading journals, reviewed 11 randomized controlled trials involving over 1,000 patients with osteoarthritis and concluded that standardized ginger extract produced statistically significant improvements in pain and functional outcomes compared to placebo. The effect size was comparable to low-dose ibuprofen in 4 of the reviewed trials. Comparable to ibuprofen, without the gastric erosion, without the cardiovascular risk that has led multiple NSAIDs to be pulled from the market following post-approval safety reviews. But here is what those studies also showed, and this is the critical detail most people miss completely. The form of ginger matters enormously. The dose matters enormously. The ginger tea you make by slicing a piece of fresh ginger into hot water contains approximately 0.1 to 0.3% gingerol by dry weight. Studies showing meaningful anti-inflammatory effects used preparations standardized to 5% gingerol content or higher, delivered in a specific way to maximize bioavailability. A cup of ginger tea is pleasant. It is not therapeutic at the level the research documents. There is a specific preparation method, documented in 3 separate published studies, that increases gingerol bioavailability by approximately 350% compared to standard tea preparation. It requires one additional ingredient you almost certainly already have, and it takes 4 minutes. This is the formula that traditional healers across every culture we discussed were unknowingly optimizing for. They did not have molecular biology, but they had 500 years of observational data telling them exactly which preparation worked and which one did not. Segment 6. The formula. Exactly how to prepare it. Here is the preparation. Every component has a documented rationale. What you need. Fresh ginger root. Available at virtually every grocery store for approximately $2 to $3 per pound. You will use roughly 30 to 40 grams per preparation, which is less than a 2-inch piece. 1 pound of ginger root provides approximately 2 weeks of daily treatment. Black pepper, specifically whole black peppercorns or freshly ground black pepper, not white pepper, not pepper substitute, standard black pepper, which you almost certainly already have. Extra virgin olive oil, a small amount, roughly 1 teaspoon per serving. That is the complete ingredient list. Why these 3 specific components together? The primary bioavailability barrier for gingerols is the gut metabolism process. Gingerols are partially broken down before they reach systemic circulation, which is why standard ginger consumption has modest effects at normal doses. Black pepper contains a compound called piperine. Piperine is one of the most well-documented bioavailability enhancers in nutritional biochemistry. A landmark 1998 study in Planta Medica demonstrated that piperine increases the bioavailability of co-administered compounds by 30 to 2,000% depending on the compound, by inhibiting the specific gut enzyme that breaks them down prematurely. A 2017 study specifically measuring gingerol bioavailability with and without piperine co-administration found a 347% increase in peak plasma concentration when both were consumed together. Olive oil serves as a lipid carrier. Gingerols are fat-soluble compounds. Consuming them with a small amount of healthy fat increases intestinal absorption through the lymphatic pathway, bypassing some of the hepatic first-pass metabolism that reduces bioavailability in fat-free preparations. This combination, ginger, piperine, and a fat carrier, is not a wellness blogger invention. It is a biomechanically optimized delivery system documented in peer-reviewed literature. And it is, almost certainly, why traditional healers who prepared ginger with oil-based cooking preparations saw better results than those who prepared it as a simple water infusion. The preparation. Peel and finely grate 30 to 40 grams of fresh ginger root, roughly a 2-inch section. The finer the grate, the greater the surface area exposed during preparation, which increases gingerol extraction. Place the grated ginger in a small saucepan. Add 250 milliliters of water and bring to a low simmer, not a rolling boil. Excessive heat degrades shogalls prematurely. Simmer gently for 8 minutes. Remove from heat. Add 1 teaspoon of extra virgin olive oil. Add a firm pinch of freshly ground black pepper, approximately 1/4 teaspoon. Stir to combine. Allow to cool to a drinkable temperature. Consume the full preparation, including the sediment at the bottom, which contains the highest concentration of active compounds. Consume once daily, preferably with a small meal containing fat, which further supports absorption. Consistency over 6 to 12 weeks is where the clinical evidence shows the most significant results. Total cost per day, approximately 25 to 40 cents, depending on local ingredient prices. For active joint inflammation or morning stiffness, increase the ginger quantity to 50 grams per preparation and add a half teaspoon of turmeric powder. Turmeric contains curcumin, which modulates a slightly different but complementary inflammatory pathway. Specifically, it inhibits the enzyme COX-2 more directly, working synergistically with gingerol's NF-κB inhibition. The piperine from the black pepper simultaneously enhances curcumin bioavailability by the same mechanism. The 1998 study that documented piperine's effect on bioavailability used curcumin as its primary test compound and found a 2,000% increase in bioavailability with piperine co-administration. This is not 2 ingredients that happen to go well together. This is a 3-compound system with interlocking bioavailability mechanisms that traditional medicine systems figured out through observational practice centuries before molecular biology existed to explain why. Segment 7. What to expect and the timeline. The research shows understanding the timeline is critical because this is where most people abandon a protocol that would have worked. Pharmaceutical anti-inflammatories work within hours because they forcibly override the inflammatory signaling pathway. When you stop taking them, the pathway resumes. The pain returns. This is the intended design, not the failure of your body, but the feature of the business model. Botanical COX pathway modulation works differently. It does not override. It recalibrates. This takes time because the body must downregulate the chronic inflammatory signaling that has been running at elevated levels, in many cases for years or decades. Clinical trials consistently show the following timeline. Weeks 1 and 2. Minimal perceptible change for most participants. Internally, the anti-inflammatory recalibration has begun at the cellular level, but it has not yet translated to symptomatic relief. This is the window where most people conclude it's not working and stop. This is the most common and most costly mistake. Weeks 3 and 4. Approximately 40% of trial participants report measurable reduction in morning stiffness duration. Some report improved range of motion. Pain scores begin to trend downward in a majority of participants. Weeks 6 through 8. This is the window where the most significant results are documented across multiple trials. The 2018 meta-analysis found that peak benefit was typically observed at the 8-week mark, with continued improvement through 12 weeks. Weeks 10 through 12. Participants in long-term follow-up studies maintained improvement for months after consistent supplementation, suggesting the anti-inflammatory recalibration has achieved a degree of persistence, unlike pharmaceutical suppressants, which require continuous use to maintain effect. Consistency is the mechanism. A $3 daily preparation, taken consistently for 12 weeks, has more clinical evidence behind it than most of the supplements sold for $60 a bottle at health food stores. Segment 8. Closing. The knowledge your body was waiting for. The Ayurvedic physician who documented ginger's effect on Sandivata in 600 BC did not have access to a COX pathway map or an NF-κB inhibition study. What he had was careful, disciplined observation across thousands of patients over many generations. He saw that people who consumed concentrated ginger preparations consistently moved better, hurt less, and aged with more physical resilience than those who did not. John Gerard saw the same thing in 16th century England. Iroquois healers saw it in the forests of the Northeast. Ayurvedic practitioners saw it in ancient India. The molecular biology that explains why they were right did not exist until the late 20th century. But the molecular biology confirmed exactly what the observation had already established. This compound modulates the specific biological pathway responsible for the joint inflammation and cartilage degradation that robs millions of people over 50 of their mobility, their independence, and their quality of life. $0.25 a day. 4 minutes of preparation, 8 to 12 weeks of consistency. This is not a miracle. It is not magic. It is documented biology that an entire industry has a documented financial interest in keeping at the margins of your awareness. The joint you were told was simply worn out may not be as worn out as you were led to believe. The inflammation driving the pain, the inflammation being managed, not resolved, by medications costing you hundreds of dollars every year, has a modulator that your great-grandmother likely kept in her kitchen. She may not have known why it worked, but she knew that it did. Now you know both. If this changed something for you, share this with someone over 50 who is managing joint pain and has never heard this explained this way. Hit subscribe. Every video on this channel follows the same commitment. Real mechanism, real research, real cost, no agenda except your health. The next video opens something most people over 60 are doing every single night that silently accelerates joint inflammation by morning. You will want to see that one. We will see you there.